I believe that almost every decision comes down to power or money. What I want to know is as a doctor, how do you get away with, I don't know, I wouldn't want to mislabel it, calling it misdiagnosing, but if somebody died from a gunshot wound, they didn't die because of COVID, but yet doctors were bought in on this. Why?
You just chose some key words.
Okay. Tell me that.
You used the term bought. The normal role of pathologists in the whole medical system, which is what I've trained in,
Right.
and I've been taught pathology at medical schools, including uniformed services, the health sciences. So the role of the pathologist is basically quality control for the hospital to make sure that the hospital is doing its job, it's correctly diagnosing disease, it's correctly treating disease, and if it's not, detecting how that's gone wrong. The pathologist was specifically excluded from this process. Performing autopsies were discouraged. It was originally presented as if this was such a lethal virus that anybody doing an autopsy would put themselves at enormous risk, as if it was Ebola or something, right? Now, all of this was wrapped around fear. And you ask the why question. I can't avoid the conclusion that all of this was about promoting fear. What we have here is appears quite clearly, including through the WHO documents that you mentioned we had put out on our Substack today, a concerted effort to elevate reported mortality. If we put the best possible look on it, a elevated mortality rate would be very useful in convincing the general public to accept threat mitigation measures, which they might not otherwise accept.
So the thing that I find fascinating about this is here we are 3 years later. We just read in the Washington Post, the New York Times is a similar story. You've put it out on Substack. But I mean, my broader point is the mainstream media, which you can't get more mainstream and legacy than the Post and the Times, are now sort of acting like, oh yeah, of course we knew this, right? It was a gunshot wound. We shouldn't have counted that.
So they're doing a gradual normalization of that which they had previously labeled as mis or disinformation.
Right. And the federal court has ruled that the administration, specifically the Biden administration, it named the DOJ, the FBI, Corinne Jean-Pierre.
You're talking about the recent case of Missouri versus Biden.
Yes. And it says, hey, you guys literally silenced everybody from one side when it came to this. The thing that
only conservatives.
But only conservatives.
On multiple topics, not just on COVID. Biden's laptop, the son's laptop, everything.
But you alluded to this. The thing that I think is funny is that you guys, Bhattacharya or yourself, are the people who are the experts. You have the degrees, the experience in this field. Fauci doesn't. And yet it's his word over yours.
And it's worse than that, because what was deployed at the time in real time was this new tool that I had never encountered it before. For me, personally, as somebody who'd been through multiple outbreaks, I had never encountered anything like the way the media was managed this time.
Right.
And the new tool that was deployed was the fact checker. And these AstroTurf...
Which, by the way, those guys basically can't get a job. So you can't do anything. Why don't you be a fact checker?
One of the top fact checker organizations that hammered me early on, the head of the organization, it was a pop-up, AstroTurf, used to run a garage band. A punk garage band. I mean, that's the level of personnel you have.
But let me get back to my point, though. Do you think it's more power or money or something else? What is it? Because you mentioned fear. That's obviously a power thing. But is there a money factor, and is there something else that did this? Because
this is one of the most profitable products in the history of the pharmaceutical industry. And what I've heard recently from a GS-14 level person, so this is a very senior government official, a longtime career employee of the State Department, was that Scott Gottlieb was directly involved in influencing public policy to shift from Moderna to Pfizer, which is why we ended up with such an emphasis on Pfizer, because originally, as you'll recall, the government was very focused on Moderna because Moderna is basically a cutout of DARPA. It's a cutout company with DARPA funding. It's been generated by DARPA, and the follow-on funding is coming from In-Q-Tel and other associated cutout.
Well, as we discussed, some of these social media platforms, they're not always big fans of what Dr. Malone has to say. So if you want to see the full uncensored discussion with Dr. Malone, go to my locals page, seanspicer.locals.com, and you can see the entire conversation there, completely uncensored from the social media platforms. Hope to see you there.